Getting sober should not be easy. Getting sober requires changing everything. Getting sober should not be comfortable. Getting sober should be the most uncomfortable thing in your life. It was the most uncomfortable thing in my life. In this video, I'm going to talk about one key concept of addiction to help deepen understanding and hopefully aid you in getting rid of what's ailing you. But first, here on the adjacent doorstep, I talk about addiction recovery and tie in psychological insight. I was addicted to alcohol and substances for over 20 years of my life, but now I'm entering my second year of sobriety, and I want to share a bit of my experience as a way of giving back. Now let's get into it. The key concept of addiction that I want to talk about today is called stimulus generalization. Now I think stimulus generalization is an important concept to understand because stimulus generalization ties in the fundamentals of addiction. When we're addicted, we're generally not addicted to simply one thing. We're often addicted to several things at once. Addictions grow together, and the root of one addiction generally feeds the roots of other addictions. And when you water one root, you water all the roots. What I mean by this is when you have addictions that are closely related. Now, a simple example would be cigarettes and smoking. This is such a basic and common generalization of addictions, accepted as normal. Caffeine and nicotine are stimulants, and they generalize together. Both substances boost each other. They give a little bit of a cognitive enhancement. Now, when I was addicted to smoking cigarettes, every time I had a coffee, I would increase the rate that I was smoking at because smoking while being caffeinated released more dopamine. It just felt better. It felt good to me. So the generalization of these two stimuluses, these two stimuli, created a stronger addiction than if I was just doing one or the other. Now, another example of stimulus generalization would be alcohol and smoking, or alcohol and partaking in stimulants. For example, alcohol and cocaine. That's a classic example. And actually, the combination of alcohol and cocaine, the metabolization of it in the stomach creates its own compound called cocaethylene, I believe, cocaethanol, cocaethylene. And that potentiates the cocaine. Alcohol calms down the negative effects of cocaine while also potentiating its positive effects. I had a run with cocaine and alcohol. When I was using cocaine by itself, I was fine. I could take it or leave it. But once I started pairing it with alcohol, well, anytime I would drink on its own without anything else, I would get an urge to go and acquire some cocaine or some kind of stimulant because my body became accustomed to the stimulant. And I didn't like just being drunk. After a certain point of being drunk, it feels sloppy. And without that stimulant, I would get irritable and I would be craving a little bit something extra, a little bit something more. So this would drive me into compulsive drug seeking every time I would get drunk, and I wouldn't be able to separate the two. The thing is, when I would get sober, I would always tell myself, I'm just going to drink. It's going to be okay. I'd get sober for 3-4 weeks at a time, and then I would trick myself into buying 2 bottles of wine, 1 bottle of wine to cook with, the other bottle of wine to drink. And I was just going to take it easy, have a night for myself and call it an early night. But that never really worked. That never turned out the way I thought it was going to turn out because every time I would get a few drinks in me, by the time I was halfway down a bottle, I was already thinking, okay, I would like to liven up this night a little bit. And I would be calling up a buddy or getting a cab to a familiar location, and that would turn into a 3-night bender, right? And I did this so many times for 6 years straight. I did this to myself where I would get sober. I would think that I had beaten the addiction and trick myself into drinking a little bit, that I can manage the drinking and leave the drugs at the door. But that never turned out to be the case. It was always a precept to going on a bender, going on a binge, was that I can manage alcohol by itself. Once I paired the stimulants, whether it was cocaine or speed, with alcohol, every time I would consume alcohol by itself, I would get an urge to go and consume stimulants with it. Now, I used to drink by itself. I'd just drink and maybe smoke some weed, maybe have an e-cigarette or something like that, a couple of Red Bulls at the most. And I did that for years. No problem. I was just an alcoholic. No, I was just a drinker, a weekend drinker. But I didn't have the paired stimulus of stimulants with the alcohol, and the addiction was much more manageable. Once the alcohol got paired with the stimulants, that's when my life just went off the rails. That's when that's when I couldn't put the brakes on whatever ride I was on. The alcohol just made everything a mess. So with stimulus generalization, I want to talk about why getting sober should be hard. If getting sober is easy, it's probably not going to last. It's probably not real. Now, what I mean by easy, I mean that as in it should feel comfortable, that it should feel good, that you can baby step it, like putting on a Band-Aid or removing a Lego block or something. It shouldn't be that easy. It shouldn't feel comfortable. Getting sober should not be comfortable. Getting sober should be the most uncomfortable thing in your life. It was the most uncomfortable thing in my life. And it should be that, because that's when we know that we're enacting some serious, deep change in our lives, when we're unrooting the cause of our problems. So that's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to take time. It's going to take effort. It's going to take dedication, perseverance, grit, wherewithal. I had to change everything about my life. I had to change my environment. I had to change my friends. I had to change my interests. I had to change my thinking. Changing my thinking was a big one. See, I thought that I played into the role of being an alcoholic or an addict. At some point in my addiction, in those seven years of the last 20 years of my addiction, at some point, I remember submitting to the fact that I was an addict and this was going to be my life and I had no hope. And that was the end of it. That was the end of my life, really. I mean, I didn't even expect that I would be here alive today, but I am, and I'm thankful to God. So the first thing that I did to start the journey to recovery was that I admitted that I was helpless, I was powerless, and I asked God for help. Please, God, help me. I can't help myself. And then eventually I asked help from a family member, and I checked myself into a 12-step program. And now I'm entering my second year of sobriety, and I feel the best I've felt in my life. And it really feels like I'm just starting my life. The only thing I regret is not starting this sooner. So getting sober should not be easy. Getting sober requires changing everything. If I'm addicted to alcohol, cigarettes, ecstasy, cocaine, pornography, sex, all these things, they're all going to tie into each other. They're all generalized stimulus. So when I do one of those things, when I partake in one of those things, it's going to trigger urges to do the other things. And that was my problem. Music was a big thing too. I paired music with partying and drinking. So anytime I would listen to music when I was sober, I would start feeling it. And I'd be like, yeah, let's get it going. Let's take it to the next level. I want to party, you know? And that would just start a cascade of going back into the same cycle again, because I had paired that stimulus with the alcohol and the drugs. Now, after being a year sober, I've distanced myself from the triggers and from the generalizations, the associations. So now I can listen to music. And yeah, sometimes I get the thought, oh, this would be cool with a couple E's or whatever. But it doesn't eat at me. It doesn't gnaw away at me. I accept that I can enjoy this music without having to consume anything external to feel good. I could just listen to the music, enjoy the natural release of dopamine, and call it a day. So that took quite some time. That's called stimulus extinguishing. So after a length period of time, you can extinguish the stimulus generalizations or the stimulus associations, so you can start the things that you enjoy into your life again. So going cold turkey is hard, yes, but the only way you can disassociate the stimulus generalizations and associations is by quitting everything that you're addicted to. If that means you're addicted to alcohol, sex, porn, cocaine, ecstasy, whatever, if you quit one at a time, you're going to end up relapsing because it's going to trigger the same neural pathways that have been rooted into your neural network. And the stimulus association, the generalization, is so strong that it's going to create urges for you to repeat your old patterns of behaviors because that's what we like. That's what the brain likes. Our neural networks relate to each other through association. So if there's an association in a network tied to different other sub-associations, activating one of those sub-associations is going to activate the whole network. So that's why cold turkey is honestly the best path to get sober, especially if you're addicted to several things at once. And even if it's not an official drug, like porn or sex or something like that, or it's some kind of habit, if there's still a stimulus generalization, it's going to associate with that neural network and it's going to trigger urges to use. And I believe this leads to compulsive use disorder, right? Because the associations are being triggered through the connection of the neural network. So getting sober shouldn't be easy. It should be hard. It should be uncomfortable because when it's uncomfortable, that's when we know we're doing the deep work to untangle the web of addiction that's rooted in our lives. So if you find this informative and you want to hear more, check out this video.